Okay, so we're recording and we're going over the Quiz 8 study guide. Now, before we start, did you see my email today where I said that you could finally see the results of Quiz 7? Did you see that, Katie? Yeah. So you can go in there now and you can look and see what the right answers are. And I think you did fine on it, but is there any questions you wanted to ask me about anything you missed on Quiz 7 before we?
No, I think I'm good.
Okay, great. All right. So the first one's pretty self-explanatory. This is kind of jumping a bit ahead. They sort of talk a little bit about in the book about a fiscal policy and monetary policy, but as we get farther into actually, let me just pull up the what am I looking at? Let me just look at this really quickly because it's kind of hard to really. I mean, the questions that I'm giving you are questions from actual AP exams, so sometimes I have to jump a little bit ahead in terms of what we're actually reading about in the book. So we're on chapter. We are on chapter 12. No, we're not. We're on chapter 13 and 14. And so I try to make most of the questions in your assignment, be aligned with what's in here. However, actually, are we? Yeah. I'm getting confused. But we'll get a lot more into in chapter 15, especially 16, and then when we get to chapters, let's see, fiscal policy. Where is fiscal policy? Tell you what, let me just so I don't waste your time here. Let me just do something real quick because this doesn't always follow. I don't think a logical. Okay, so right. So we won't get to the really details about a fiscal policy until chapter 18. So I'm jumping ahead, but this is really not. This is just very simple. So you shouldn't have any problems with these questions because basically what we're talking about here is policy. Fiscal policy is policy on either government spending or government taxing. That's all it is, really. And so if we think about that in relation to our aggregate supply, aggregate demand model, fiscal policy is designed to shift the aggregate demand curve. So if the government spends more money, that's going to be an increase in government spending here, which would obviously increase aggregate demand, which means that we're shifting our aggregate demand curve to the right, which would happen if we were in a recession and you wanted to close that a recessionary gap. Now, if we're actually in a situation where we're above where the actual long run potential is, if we're up here, then the government would want to increase taxes, which would lower disposable income. So if the government increased taxes, that would shift the aggregate demand curve to the left. So a fiscal policy is designed to shift the aggregate demand whichever way it needs to shift to get at our potential GDP right here. Okay. Now, monetary policy is controlled by the Federal Reserve Bank, and it's simply controlling the money supply. And we don't need to get into detail about how they do it. We'll read about that and see videos about that in whatever chapter that I just said, 15 or 16. But just know that it is the Federal Reserve Bank controls the money supply of the economy, and that's shown on this graph right here. I've got pulled up. money market graph. So when they shift, for example, when they shift the when they actually increase the money supply, that's going to make nominal interest rates go down, which is going to increase investment, which once again is designed to shift the aggregate demand curve out, because that's an increase in investment right here. Okay, so both fiscal and monetary policy are designed to shift the aggregate demand curve most often to the right when we're in a recession. Okay, does that make sense? Make sense?
Yes.
Okay, so that's kind of all that is. Now, I'll let you just read over this. This is just, some of the questions on the macro AP exam are just going to be knowledge. You're not going to have to figure anything out. It's either you know it or you don't. So make sure you review back over how the Bureau of Labor Statistics actually determines unemployment. I pretty much got it right here. Okay, but you can always look it up. Okay. Now, this is going to be really, really important for you to understand these relationships right here. And this is in your chapter. It's in the videos, the videos. And so you need to, just really go over this carefully and understand that, what these are. And they've got some graphs in the book that I haven't seen on any of the on any of the exams, so I'm not putting it on the exam. However, you're going to be given the problems where you're going to need to figure out whatever a variable it is that you don't have. So, for example, I've got right here. If you just know this relationship right here, and you really know this, you'll be fine. So say, for example, you get a problem where they say the marginal propensity to consume is 0.6, which means that the consumers are spending 60% of their income and they're saving 40%. So you know that if the marginal propensity to consume is 0.6, then the marginal propensity to save has to be 0.4. Okay, so if you were just given the marginal propensity to save, you wouldn't have to do the 1 minus. You just plug it in here, okay? Because you're actually getting the marginal propensity to save by subtracting from 1 the marginal propensity to consume, because both of these together have to equal 1. Which makes sense, okay? So anyway, let's just say that spending, you are given in the problem that spending increases by 11 billion. So you just plug it in here, and they're asking you what would be the change in GDP. Well, you'd simply plug in the formula, and 1 over 0.4 is 2.5. And then you just simply multiply both sides by 11, which, so it'd be 2 point, just a simple algebra, right? 2.5 times 11 equals 27.5. So the change in GDP would be an increase of 27.5 billion. So you're going to get several questions on the quiz where you're going to need to use this formula in different ways to figure out whatever they're asking you. Okay, so make sure you've got this handy. Okay, is there any questions about this? Is any of this confusing to you? Do you understand how this works?
Yeah.
In general. And the other thing that you need to think about is the reason why there's a multiplier at all is because theoretically, well, actually what happens is when a person earns more income, they consume more. So that means their income goes to somebody else's income. Well, say I say that I got a big, huge raise and decided to hire somebody to clean my house because I don't feel like cleaning my house anymore because now I got this big, huge, a raise. So now my income becomes, and now I consume my income in terms of I consume the service of house cleaning, which is the house cleaner company's income. So you see how it just multiplies through the economy. Because when income goes up, consumption goes up. Does that make sense? Does that make sense, Katie? How it kind of
Yes.
multiplies through the economy. And the important factor here is how much of the additional, the marginal, how much of the next dollar you earn are you going to save, and how much are you going to spend? And obviously, if everyone in the economy, on average, spends more, consumes more of what they earn, it's going to be a bigger, multiplier. So, for example, if I put 0.9 in here, say that everyone spends 90% of their income, this changes to 10, right? Because 1 divided by 0.1 is 10. So you see now we're up to 100 and whatever that is, 110 billion, right? So the marginal propensity to consume makes a huge difference in terms of what your actual change in the GDP is, right? Okay, so that's all that, right? Now, this is a little bit weird. So I really thought about this. There's a question that I bet you a lot of students get wrong because it's tricky. And the point they're getting at here is if the average price level goes up in the economy, the only way you're going to maintain the same real GDP, the same real output, is if nominal income goes up the same percentage as the average price level. Now, I thought about that and said, that's just, I don't want you guys just to memorize that. I want you to understand what's actually going on. So let's go. It's always good to go to the graph because it makes it more easy to understand. So what's really happening? Because the question that we have to ask is, why would price levels go up? They just don't go up to go up. They go up most likely because supply gets more expensive. And if supply gets more expensive, or if because of a lot of reasons, say, there could be a million reasons why supply in the aggregate would get more expensive. We might have to buy, supplies, whatever we're supplying, and we're talking in the aggregate. So we're talking supply, which means everything that goes into supplying the production in the economy, and that includes labor, right? That includes parts, labor, resources, everything. So let's just say that for whatever reason, supply, the aggregate supply, the short run shifts to the left, which means at every level of output, right, it's more expensive. So at Y1, instead of costing price level 1, now it costs way up here, okay? So when we shift it, our price level is going to go up. And if we stayed here, right, then our real GDP would go down. We'd be right here. Let me just grab this guy. We'd actually be over here, right? So what we're saying is the only way that we're going to maintain the same real GDP is if nominal income goes up. And think about it. If everybody starts getting more money in their paycheck, if nominal income goes up, that means there's more money in the money supply. There's more money in the economy, which means people are able to spend more money, and that's going to shift aggregate demand to the right. So if aggregate demand shifts to the right the same amount as aggregate supply, short run, shifted to the left, we're going to end up with the same real GDP right here. So, and that would happen if nominal income, and get that guy out of there, he's confusing. That would happen if the nominal income went up the same percentage as price level, or you could also think about it the same if you had the same shift to the right of the aggregate demand as you had to the left, of the initial left shift of aggregate supply. Does all that make sense? Is that good with that?
Mm-hmm.
So that just helps you understand why this is true. Why this is true, okay? And the key here is nominal income going up in the economy. If the average income of all Americans goes up, then it's going to shift aggregate demand to the right. It will increase. Okay. This is just simply, once again, this is just, thinking, I've already kind of gone over that one, you just need to know how this, the relationship, how MPC works with this simple spending multiplier, which is simply right here, okay? What this formula or what this expression is. So if you know that, then you're good with that. You'll be able to figure out any of the questions that they ask you. Okay. Now, if the economy is operating below its potential, what's going to happen in the long run is you're going to get a shift in the aggregate supply. That's that neoclassical long run thinking. So if we're back here and we take the aggregate demand out of what we're talking about here, and we're here, what's going to bring us to full in the long run, what's going to bring us to here is a rightward shift in aggregate supply. That's what's going to bring us in the long run. Because what happens when we're operating below, think about it. This also, if we think of the Phillips curve, this also means that we have a high level of unemployment. So that's going to drive wages down. So that's going to mean, so what happens here is, let me get this guy out of here. So what happens here is we've got a downward shift in the price levels so at a lower price level, we'll end up here, right? So we'll end up right about, let me get this guy. We'll end up right about here. It's not perfect, but you can see it. Come on. Okay, right about there, right? So that's what's going to happen in the long run. That's what's going to bring us from operating with below our potential with a rate of unemployment above the natural rate right here. And then we'll see supply get less expensive, which means wages go down in order to bring the short run aggregate of supply down to the right. Okay, that's what's going to happen. Okay, in the long run. Okay, which means that price levels will go down, but real output, right, goes up. And I just don't have it. Let me just switch this guy around. So we'll have a rightward shift of the aggregate supply, the short run aggregate supply. Price levels go down, real GDP or real output goes up, and that brings us to our full employment at our potential GDP, full potential. Okay. Now, what's going to happen if wages go up more than productivity? That means that supply in general, because wages are part of the cost of supply, are going to go up. And that's going to mean a leftward shift. So that's going to drive the short-run aggregate supply curve to the left, right? So that would mean it goes this way. Everything, supply gets more expensive because wages are higher, okay? I'll let you, this is just stuff that you should know. I'm pretty sure it's in the book. And if it's not, there it is. You need to know this is a Keynesian. This is this is what Keynes came up with. 3 types of demand. So just make sure you're familiar with all 3. I'll let you guys study that on your own. Okay, this is a little bit tricky right here. If the government decides to tax at a level that will balance the budget, if we're at full employment, right? If that's a level of taxation, then if we're not at full employment, it means that the taxes will not be enough to balance the budget. So if this is how they decide, if they say, okay, we're going to tax at the level that will balance the budget as long as we're at full employment, right? Full potential. If there's unemployment above the natural rate of employment, if the economy is in a recession, then we're going to go into a debt. Because taxes will not be enough. Does that make sense? Because people who are not employed don't pay taxes. So yeah, okay. Now this is just understand. Now I'll be honest, I had forgotten exactly. I was a little bit confused, so I looked this up because it can be confusing. So when we think about the business cycle, we go into a peak and a recession, and then the trough is the low point, and then there's an expansion, and then there's a peak. So just make sure you have really clear in your head what these are. And I will tell you, and I hope everyone hears this on the video, try to answer these questions without looking at your notes. I mean, try to learn this to a level that you can do it without your notes, because when you take the final, you're not going to be able to use your notes. And of course, when you take the actual AP exam, you're not going to be able to use your notes. So try to study enough where you can do this. Now, I don't have any problem at all if you have time for you to go back and check your answers before you actually submit your quiz. But I'm just saying, for your own development and for your own confidence, see how many of these questions you can answer correctly just from what you know in your head, because that's what you're going to have to do anyway, right? So don't just memorize it. Really look at this and say, well, what makes sense? And it just makes sense that you would go a peak, a recession, trough, expansion, a peak. Okay, so that makes sense. And there's a website right here that I found that explains it if you want to go there. Okay. This is something you can just look up. What would increase the capital stock of an economy? What kind of actions would do that? You could look that up. I'll let you look that up. This one right here, if you think about this, if the dollar is strong, when I was in London back in, when was I in London? 1990 or something. I wanted to buy a bear, a stuffed bear, right? And the price said 12 pounds. So I said, well, 12 pounds, and I'm thinking a pound is about what $1 is. So I went to buy it, and it cost $25, because at that point, a pound was about $2. So as a tourist, I was in the Navy, but I was actually, a tourist buying things in a foreign country. And because the dollar, it took $2 to buy 1 pound, everything I bought seemed to me to be very expensive, right? Double. Now, if the dollar were to appreciate relative to the pound, say the dollar became equal, let's just say that just for a sake of making it simple. If the dollar, were to gain value relative to the pound, then as a tourist in London, the bear that I bought would have only cost $12 instead of $24 or $5, however much you call it, right? So when the dollar appreciates, it helps folks who are out of the country buying things with dollars. Does that make sense? Is that good with it? You good with that? Okay. And then we already went over this. I said that the more, when income goes up, consumption goes up, and that's just how and that just multiplies through the economy. I've gone over this, and obviously when we're in a recession, we want to use a fiscal or monetary policy that's going to shift the aggregate demand curve to the right. So that would be government spending. That would be decreasing taxes, bringing taxes lower so people have more disposable income. That would be increasing the money supply on the monetary policy to fight a recession would be putting more money into the money supply. Okay. Dissaving is just what it sounds like. If you dissave, it means that you spend more than you actually earn. So, which is usually done with your credit cards, right? So if you actually borrow money and spend more than you earn, you're dissaving, okay? That's the opposite of saving. Okay. This is just looking at the money demand, and if government spending goes up, right? So let's look at that graph right here. If government spending goes up, let me get this guy out of here. Well, actually, I don't have to. It's going to mean that money demand goes up, right? Government spending more means there's going to be more money demanded. And if more money is demanded, let me get this guy out of here so we're not confused. If more money is demanded, then we're going to actually say we're here to here. We're going to raise interest rates, okay? So government spending going up means that money demand goes up, and if money demand shifts to the right, our nominal interest rates are going to go up, which is why we talk about the term crowding out. If the government spends a lot more money, they have to borrow it, and that drives interest rates higher, which means it's harder for private firms to borrow the money they need to invest. Okay. Any questions so far? Are we good?
I'm good. Yeah.
Okay. All right. You seem so excited. So excited. This is such exciting stuff. We're actually done. I'll let you look up this right here. You can just look this up. This is a review. And I can give you a hint. Because you may not be able to find this. You probably can. But one of the things that the CPI, when they try to calculate in inflation, they have a hard time compensating for the fact that consumers will substitute different items if one item gets more expensive. So it may not necessarily be as bad as they think it is, right? Say, for example, the price of, say the price of beef goes way up. Well, instead of me having to spend more money on a beef, I might just say, well, I'm just going to start buying a chicken. So in terms of my real income, it might not hurt me as much as looking at the increase in price of beef sort of looks like it hurts me, because we really have a hard time knowing how consumers substitute out to keep their expenditures about the same. Does that make sense? Yes?
Yes.
Okay. Now, were you in the session when I went over assignment 8? Were you in there for that one?
I didn't attend it, but I watched the
You
video.
watched the video? Okay. And I know the videos are boring. I'm sorry. I don't know how to make them more exciting. But while we are recording, I want to show you, since you're my one student, and thank you, and all of your fellow students should send you a thank you card, because they wouldn't get this video to look at if you weren't here. So I appreciate you very much. Because it's so much easier to talk to you or to students than to just talk to no one. It's very weird. Okay. But I wanted to show you the calendar, okay? Here's the calendar. We are now right here, okay? Assignment 8 and quiz 8 are due Sunday, and I may not have quiz 9 available, but I will certainly have assignment, and that's not going to be there. Let me just get rid of that. That's not going to be there, and I'm going to do a session either Tuesday or Wednesday to go over the quiz. To go over not the quiz, sorry, to go over assignment 9. I'll do that right here before your mid-winter break. Now, this may not be your mid-winter break. Where are you? Are you in Connecticut?
Yes.
Okay, so I think you have this, right? So because this
Yes.
break is in here, assignment 9 is not going to be due until March 3rd. So you're going to have plenty of time, right? So I'll probably do the video, or the session, I should say, for quiz 9. I'll probably do that sometime during this week right here, or maybe this week right here. You got plenty of time. But I'm almost through with the prompt for discussion 7. So that's going to be up tomorrow early. So what I'm going to do is have a discussion 7. You'll have it by tomorrow, and that will be due. All 3 parts are going to be due on the 24th of February. Okay, so you have plenty of time. You'll have here, you have 2 weeks. Okay, that's kind of the plan. All right. Okay.
Okay.
And I'll stop the recording, and we're done. Let me just see if I can get this to work.